The bullet had missed her heart by 2 inches, but it had shattered her trust completely, and Eleanor Fitzgerald swore she would never let another man close enough to finish what her husband started. She pressed her palm against the scar hidden beneath her travel-worn dress as the stagecoach rattled toward Marysvale, Utah territory, carrying her toward a future she hoped would be empty of men and their promises. The year was 1878, and she had survived 24 years in a world that seemed determined to break women like her. But surviving and living were two different things entirely. The coach lurched over another rut in the mountain road, and Eleanor gripped the wooden seat beneath her. The other passengers, a merchant and his wife, had gotten off at the last stop, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the driver's occasional shouts to the horses. Through the dusty window, she could see the Tushar Mountains rising like ancient sentinels, their peaks still touched with snow despite the late spring warmth settling over the valleys below. Marysvale was supposed to be a quiet town, a place where she could disappear into the work of running a boarding house her aunt had left her, a place where no one knew her story. The stagecoach rounded a bend, and Eleanor's stomach dropped as the vehicle tilted dangerously to one side. The driver's shouts turned frantic, and she heard the crack of his whip, then the terrible sound of splintering wood. The coach tilted further, and Eleanor threw herself toward the opposite side, trying to counterbalance, but it was no use. The world turned sideways, then upside down, and she felt herself thrown like a rag doll as the coach left the road entirely. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her shoulder and ribs, but she had enough presence of mind to roll away from the wreckage. The coach had tumbled down a steep embankment, coming to rest against a stand of pine trees. The horses screamed somewhere above her, and she could hear the driver moaning, which meant he was alive at least. Eleanor tried to stand, but her left ankle gave way immediately, sending fresh waves of pain through her leg. She collapsed back onto the rocky ground, breathing hard, trying to assess the damage. Her dress was torn, her hair had come loose from its pins, and blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. The driver's moaning had stopped, which worried her more than the pain. "Help," she called out, but her voice came out weak and thready. She tried again, louder this time. "Help! Someone help us!" The mountains threw her voice back at her, mocking. The road above was barely traveled, the driver had said so himself. They might not see another soul for hours, maybe days. Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting back the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She had not come this far, survived this much, to die on a mountainside in Utah territory. A sound made her eyes snap open. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming down the slope. For a moment, hope surged in her chest, then caution took over. She was alone, injured, vulnerable. The footsteps could belong to anyone, a good Samaritan or a predator. Her hand fumbled at her reticule, searching for the small pistol she kept there, but the bag was gone, lost somewhere in the tumble. A man emerged from the trees, and Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy shirt that strained across his chest, revealing arms corded with muscle. A rifle was slung across his back, and a hunting knife hung at his belt. He looked like something from another time, wild and untamed, and every instinct Eleanor had screamed at her to run. But she could not run, could barely move, and so she did the only thing she could. She lifted her chin and met his eyes. They were dark, nearly black, but there was something in them that made her pause. Not cruelty or calculation, but concern. He approached slowly, hands visible, as if he understood that he was frightening her. "Madam," he said, and his voice was deep, roughened by years of disuse but not unkind. "I heard the crash from my camp. Are you hurt?" "My ankle," Eleanor managed, hating how small her voice sounded. "The driver, he is up there somewhere. I think he might be injured worse." The man nodded once, then moved past her with surprising grace for someone so large. He climbed back up the embankment with ease, and Eleanor heard him moving around, checking on the driver and the horses. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Driver has passed," he said simply. "Broke his neck in the fall. Horses are spooked but not badly hurt. I will get them loose and calm them. Then we need to get you somewhere safe." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. The driver had been kind to her, had helped load her trunk without comment when she boarded in Salt Lake City. Now he was gone just like that, another person taken by the cruelty of an indifferent world. "I am sorry," the mountain man said, and there was genuine sympathy in his voice. "Did you know him well?" "No," Eleanor whispered, "but he did not deserve that. No one does." The man worked efficiently, freeing the horses from their traces and leading them to a patch of grass where he hobbled them so they would not wander. Then he returned to Eleanor, kneeling beside her with a canteen. "Drink," he said, offering it to her. "You have had a shock." Eleanor hesitated, old fears rising up. Do not take anything from strangers. Do not trust men who offer help. They always want something in return. But her throat was parched, and the concern in his eyes seemed genuine. She took the canteen and drank, the water cool and sweet. "Thank you," she said, handing it back. "I am going to check your ankle now," he said. "I will be gentle, but it is going to hurt. Are you ready?" She nodded, bracing herself. His hands were huge, calloused and scarred, but they moved with surprising gentleness as he examined her ankle through her boot. Even so, she could not suppress a gasp of pain when his fingers found the swelling. "Not broken," he said after a moment, "but badly sprained. You will not be walking on it for a while." He sat back on his heels, studying her face. "I have a cabin about 2 miles from here. I can take you there, get you settled, then ride into Marysvale for the sheriff. He will need to know about the driver and the accident." Every warning bell in Eleanor's head went off at once. Go alone with a strange man to an isolated cabin. She would rather take her chances on the mountainside. "No," she said firmly. "Take me to town. I can manage. 2 miles of rough mountain terrain on foot with a sprained ankle." He shook his head. "You would not make it a quarter mile before you collapsed, and I cannot carry you all the way to Marysvale. That is another 8 miles past my cabin." "Then leave me here," Eleanor said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Send help from town." The mountain man studied her for a long moment, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "You are afraid of me." It was not a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. "I do not know you." "No, you do not." He stood, putting distance between them. "My name is Aaron Calloway. I have lived in these mountains for 6 years, trapping and hunting. I go into Marysvale once a month for supplies, and the folks there will vouch for me if you need references. I am not going to hurt you, madam, but I understand why you are scared." A woman alone with a strange man has every right to be cautious. The fact that he acknowledged her fear, did not mock it or get angry about it, made something in Eleanor's chest loosen slightly. But she still could not bring herself to trust him. Aaron seemed to understand. He thought for a moment, then said, "I will take you partway to town to the Peterson Ranch. It is about 4 miles from here, and Mrs. Peterson can look after you while I fetch the sheriff. Would that be acceptable?" 4 miles was still a long way with a sprained ankle, but it was better than going to an isolated cabin. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you." "I am going to have to carry you," Aaron warned. "There is no other way, but I give you my word I will not hurt you or take advantage." Eleanor wanted to laugh at that. Men's words meant nothing. She had learned that lesson too well. But she had no choice. She could not walk and she could not stay here. She nodded again, her body tense as Aaron approached. He bent down and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Eleanor stiffened, every muscle in her body screaming at her to fight, to run. But his grip was secure without being constraining. He had positioned her so she could see where they were going, not trapped against his body, and he kept his hands in appropriate places. "If I hurt you, tell me," he said. "I will adjust." They started walking, Aaron's stride long and steady. Eleanor kept her arms wrapped around herself, trying to maintain as much distance as possible despite being carried. The mountain man said nothing, just focused on navigating the rough terrain. After a while, Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly. He had not hurt her, had not taken advantage, had even acknowledged her fear and worked to address it. Maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what he appeared to be, someone trying to help. "Why do you live up here alone?" Eleanor asked, surprising herself. She had not meant to make conversation, but the silence had grown heavy. Aaron was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Same reason most folks come to the mountains, trying to escape something." "What are you escaping?" "War, killing, the man I became because of it." There was such pain in his voice that Eleanor found herself looking at his face more closely. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not much older than 30. But there were lines around his eyes that spoke of hardship, and a tightness to his jaw that suggested old wounds. "You fought in the war?" she asked. 4 years. Saw things no man should see, did things no man should do." He adjusted his grip on her slightly, careful of her injured ankle. "When it ended, I could not go back to regular life. Too much noise, too many people, so I came here." "Do you regret it?" "Coming here? No, the war. Every day." They walked in silence for a while. Eleanor found herself studying him despite her earlier wariness. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his hands and forearms, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for threats. He moved through the wilderness with the confidence of someone who belonged here, who had made peace with the wild places. "What about you?" Aaron asked. "What brings you to Marysvale?" Eleanor tensed automatically. "Family business." If Aaron noticed her reluctance, he did not push. "It is a good town. Small, but the people are decent. You should be happy there." "I am not looking for happiness," Eleanor said quietly. "Just peace." Aaron glanced down at her, something like understanding in his dark eyes. "I can respect that." They crested a ridge, and Eleanor could see a valley spread out below them. In the distance, smoke rose from chimneys, marking the location of the Peterson Ranch. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by something that felt strangely like disappointment, which made no sense at all. She should be grateful to be going somewhere safe, somewhere with other people. The walk to the ranch took over an hour, with Aaron having to stop occasionally to rest. Despite his obvious strength, carrying another person over rough terrain was exhausting work. Each time he stopped, he set Eleanor down carefully and gave her water from his canteen, checking to make sure she was not in too much pain. "I am sorry this is taking so long," he said during one rest. "If I had a horse here, it would be easier." "You are doing more than enough," Eleanor replied. And she meant it. He had been nothing but kind and respectful, going out of his way to make her feel safe. The realization made her uncomfortable. She had spent 3 years building walls around her heart, convincing herself that all men were cruel or selfish or both. Aaron Calloway did not fit that narrative, and she did not know what to do with that information. When they finally reached the ranch, a woman came running out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 40s, with graying hair and a kind face that immediately put Eleanor at ease. "Aaron Calloway, what in heaven's name?" she exclaimed. "What happened?" "Stage accident, Mrs. Peterson," Aaron said, carrying Eleanor toward the house. "Driver did not make it. This lady has a sprained ankle and some cuts and bruises. I was hoping you could look after her while I ride to town for the sheriff." Of course. Bring her inside." Mrs. Peterson held the door open, then called back into the house. Henry, get out here." A man emerged from a back room, tall and weathered, with the permanent squint of someone who spent his life outdoors. His eyes widened when he saw Aaron carrying Eleanor. "Good Lord," he said. "What happened?" Aaron explained again while Mrs. Peterson fussed over Eleanor, helping Aaron settle her into a chair by the fire. The warmth felt wonderful after the cold spring air, and Eleanor found herself relaxing for the first time since the accident. "I will head to town now," Aaron said, backing toward the door. "Should be back with the sheriff in a few hours." "Wait," Eleanor said, surprising herself again. Aaron turned back and she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Thank you for everything. I was rude to you, suspicious, and you still helped me. I am grateful." Something softened in Aaron's expression, and he nodded. "You had every right to be cautious, madam. I hope you heal quick." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Mrs. Peterson immediately started examining Eleanor's injuries, clucking her tongue at the state of her clothes and the bruises already forming on her skin. "That Aaron is a good man," she said as she worked. "Quiet as a stone, but good. He helped my Henry with a problem we had with wolves last winter, did not ask for a cent, just did it because it needed doing." "He seems kind," Eleanor admitted. "He is, though he does not think so, carries the war around with him like a heavy pack." Mrs. Peterson brought warm water and clean cloths, beginning to clean the cut on Eleanor's forehead. "My Henry was in the war too, came back different. Takes some men that way. They cannot forgive themselves for what they had to do." Eleanor thought about that as Mrs. Peterson tended to her injuries. She had spent so long thinking about her own pain, her own trauma, that she had forgotten other people carried wounds too. Aaron had been gentle with her, respectful, understanding. Maybe because he knew what it was like to hurt. The sheriff arrived 3 hours later with Aaron and 2 deputies. They took Eleanor's statement about the accident, their questions perfunctory. Stage accidents were not uncommon in the mountains, and there was no mystery here, just bad luck and a dangerous road. They would retrieve the driver's body and send word to his family, arrange for Eleanor's trunk to be brought to Marysvale. "You the one inheriting the old Morrison boarding house?" the sheriff asked, a stout man in his 50s with sharp blue eyes. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "My aunt left it to me." "Good property, needs work, but it is solid. You planning to run it yourself?" "That is the intention." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Town could use a good boarding house. The one we have now is more of a flophouse. You do it right, you will have plenty of business." He turned to Aaron. "You staying in town tonight, Calloway, or heading back up?" "Heading back," Aaron said. "I have traps to check." "Fair enough. Thanks for helping out here." Aaron nodded, then looked at Eleanor. Their eyes met and she saw concern there, genuine worry for her well-being. It made her chest feel tight. "Good luck with the boarding house, madam," he said quietly. "I hope Marysvale treats you well." "Thank you again, Mr. Calloway," Eleanor said. "I owe you a debt." "No debt, just glad I could help." He tipped his hat to her, nodded to the Petersons, and then he was gone, disappearing into the gathering dusk like a ghost. Eleanor stayed with the Petersons for 3 days while her ankle healed enough to bear weight. They were kind people, generous with their home and their time, and Eleanor found herself relaxing around them in a way she had not relaxed around anyone in years. Mrs. Peterson was a relentless caretaker, plying Eleanor with food and stories. while Mr. Peterson was quiet but warm, carving her a walking stick to help with her injured ankle. On the fourth day, the sheriff returned with a wagon to take Eleanor into Marysvale. Her trunk had been retrieved from the wreck stage, and all her belongings were intact. She said goodbye to the Petersons with genuine regret, promising to visit once she was settled. Marysvale was smaller than Eleanor had expected, just a single main street lined with wooden buildings, but it had a church, a general store, a saloon, and a handful of other businesses. The boarding house stood at the end of the street, a two-story structure with a wide porch and a dozen windows that caught the afternoon sun. It needed paint and repairs, as the sheriff had said, but Eleanor fell in love with it immediately. "Your aunt ran a good establishment," the sheriff said as he helped Eleanor down from the wagon. "Folks respected her. I think they will be glad to see you carrying on her work." Eleanor thanked him and watched as he drove away. Then she turned to face her new home, her new life. The house felt empty without her aunt, but it also felt safe. A place where she could build something on her own terms without depending on anyone else. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Eleanor threw herself into repairing and cleaning the boarding house, determined to open for business as soon as possible. She hired a local carpenter to fix the most pressing repairs, a young man named Thomas who worked hard and did not ask intrusive questions. She bought supplies from the general store, slowly getting to know the other shopkeepers and residents. Everyone was curious about her, the new woman in town, but most respected her obvious desire for privacy. Eleanor found a rhythm in the work, a purpose that kept the darkness at bay. She woke early, worked until her body ached, then fell into bed too exhausted to dream. It was not happiness, but it was something close to peace, and that was enough. A month after her arrival, on a warm June morning, Eleanor was hanging laundry in the yard behind the boarding house when she heard footsteps on the front porch. She set down her basket and walked around to the front, expecting to see a potential customer. Instead, she found Aaron Calloway standing on her porch, hat in hand, looking profoundly uncomfortable. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, his hair tied back and his beard trimmed, though he still wore his buckskin pants and carried his rifle. His shirt was clean but strained across his broad shoulders, and Eleanor found herself staring before she caught herself. "Mr. Calloway," she said, surprised. "What brings you to town?" "Supply run," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the general store. "I heard you had opened the boarding house. Thought I would stop by, see how you were doing, if that is all right." "Of course." Eleanor found herself smiling, genuinely pleased to see him. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Aaron hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to accept and not wanting to impose. "I do not want to be a bother." "You are not. Please come in." Eleanor led him inside, acutely aware of his presence behind her. He was so large he seemed to fill the doorway, but he moved carefully, respectfully, taking in the clean floors and fresh paint on the walls. "You have done good work here," he said as they entered the kitchen. "Place looks better than it has in years." "Thank you." Eleanor poured 2 cups of coffee, handing him one. "It has kept me busy." They sat at the kitchen table and an awkward silence fell. Eleanor found herself searching for something to say, wanting to keep him there but not knowing how. "How is your ankle?" Aaron asked finally. "Much better. I can walk without the stick now, though it still aches when the weather changes." "Good. I am glad." He took a sip of coffee, then said, "I wanted to apologize for scaring you that day. On the mountain. I know I am not the most civilized-looking fellow, and you had every reason to be afraid." "You have nothing to apologize for," Eleanor said firmly. "You saved my life. And you were nothing but kind and respectful. I am the one who should apologize for judging you based on your appearance. You were being careful, That is smart, not something to apologize for." They looked at each other across the table, and Eleanor felt something shift in the air between them. A recognition, maybe, or an understanding. They were both damaged people, both carrying wounds that did not show on the surface. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said impulsively. "Of course." "Why did you really come by today? You could have asked anyone in town how I was doing." Aaron was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. "I have been thinking about you," he admitted quietly. "Wondering if you were all right, if you needed anything. I know that probably sounds strange given we barely know each other, but I could not seem to stop worrying." The honesty in his voice made Eleanor's throat tight. When was the last time someone had worried about her? When was the last time someone had cared whether she was all right? "It does not sound strange," she said softly. "It sounds kind, and I appreciate it." Aaron met her eyes, and she saw hope there, tentative and fragile. "Would it be all right if I stopped by again? Next time I am in town, I would like to check on you, make sure you are doing well." Every defensive instinct Eleanor had told her to say no, to keep this man at a safe distance. But the words that came out were different. "I would like that." Aaron's face lit up with a smile that transformed him, making him look younger, almost boyish. "Good. That is good." He stayed for another hour, and they talked about inconsequential things, the weather, the town, the mountains. But beneath the surface conversation, something else was building, a connection that Eleanor had not felt in years. When Aaron finally left, promising to return in 2 weeks, Eleanor stood on the porch and watched him walk down the street, her heart beating faster than it should. She was in trouble, she realized. Because despite all her promises to herself, despite all her carefully constructed walls, she wanted to see Aaron Calloway again. And that terrified her more than anything. True to his word, Aaron returned 2 weeks later, and then 2 weeks after that. Each visit was the same. He would stop by with some small gift, fresh meat from his hunting or wildflowers picked in the high meadows, and they would sit in Eleanor's kitchen and talk. Slowly, conversation by conversation, they began to share pieces of their pasts. Aaron told her about the war, about the things he had seen and done, the friends he had lost. He told her about his family in Missouri, parents and siblings he had not seen in years because he could not bear to let them see what he had become. He told her about the nightmares that still woke him most nights, the guilt that never quite went away. Eleanor, in turn, found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. About her marriage to Daniel Fletcher, a man who had courted her with poetry and promises, then revealed himself to be a monster once the ring was on her finger. About the years of abuse, the beatings that left bruises where no one could see, the constant fear that had been her daily companion. And finally, about the night he had tried to kill her, drunk and enraged over some imagined slight. He had fired his pistol at her in their bedroom, and only her desperate dive to the side had saved her life. The bullet had torn through her side instead of her heart, and while she was on the floor bleeding, Daniel had realized what he had done and fled. She had dragged herself to a neighbor's house, and they had called the doctor. Daniel had been found 3 days later, dead by his own hand at the bottom of a ravine. Aaron listened to all of this without judgment, without pity, just quiet understanding. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he had initiated any kind of physical contact since carrying her down the mountain. "I am sorry you went through that," he said quietly. "You deserved better. You deserve better." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. "I do not know how to trust anymore, Aaron. I thought I knew Daniel. I thought he loved me, and I was so wrong. I know. And I am not going to ask you to trust me right away, but I want you to know that I would never hurt you, Eleanor. I would cut off my own hand before I raised it to you." She believed him. God help her, she believed him. And that was terrifying. Summer gave way to fall, and Aaron's visits became more frequent. He started helping with repairs around the boarding house, fixing things that were beyond Eleanor's skill. He never asked for payment, never expected anything in return, just showed up with his tools and worked until the job was done. The townspeople noticed, of course, and there was talk, but it was mostly approving. Aaron Calloway was a good man, they said, and Eleanor Fitzgerald could do worse. Eleanor's boarding house began to thrive. She had a steady stream of guests, mostly miners and merchants passing through, and her reputation for cleanliness and good cooking spread. She was building a life here, a good life, and for the first time in years she felt something like happiness. But with Aaron's increasing presence came increasing fear. She was falling in love with him. She knew it, even as she tried to deny it. She loved the way he moved, all quiet strength and careful control. She loved his gentle hands and his understanding heart. She loved how safe she felt when he was near, how the world seemed less threatening with him by her side. And that love terrified her, because love made you vulnerable. Love gave someone the power to destroy you. She had learned that lesson, and she could not forget it. One evening in late October, Aaron was helping her split wood for the winter. She watched him work from the kitchen window, admiring the play of muscles under his shirt, the easy competence with which he handled the axe. He had become so much a part of her life that she could not imagine it without him now, and that realization made her chest feel tight. When he came inside for water, she was waiting with a glass and a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, setting down the axe. "I need to ask you something," Eleanor said, "and I need you to be honest, always." She took a breath. "Why are you doing all this? The visits, the repairs, the gifts. What do you want from me, Aaron?" He was quiet for a long moment, and Eleanor braced herself for the answer she feared. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I want to court you, Eleanor. I have wanted that for months now. I want to spend time with you, get to know you better, let you get to know me. And eventually, if you will have me, I want to marry you and spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel unsafe again." It was everything she wanted to hear and everything she was afraid of all at once. "I do not know if I can do that," she whispered. "The marriage part, I mean. The idea of being someone's wife again, of giving someone that kind of power over me, it makes me feel like I cannot breathe." "Then we will not call it marriage," Aaron said simply. "We will just be Eleanor and Aaron, two people who care about each other. No power, no ownership, just partnership." "Marriage is a legal contract, Aaron. There are laws about what husbands can do, what wives owe them." "Then we will not get married legally. We will just make promises to each other, private ones that matter to us, or we will not make promises at all. We will just take it day by day, and if you wake up one morning and decide you want me gone, I will go. No questions, no guilt." Eleanor stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would do that? Give up the legal protections of marriage just to be with me?" "I do not want legal protections, Eleanor. I do not want power over you. I just want to be with you in whatever way you are comfortable with. Your terms, your timeline. I am not going anywhere." The tears came then, spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. Aaron stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since the day he had carried her down the mountain, Eleanor let herself lean into his strength. His embrace was warm and solid and safe, and she felt something in her chest crack open. "I am afraid," she whispered against his chest. "I know, I am afraid too." "Of what?" "Of failing you, of being like the men who hurt you, of proving that you were right not to trust." Eleanor pulled back enough to look at his face. "You are nothing like them, Aaron, nothing." "Then maybe we can figure this out together. Two scared people learning to trust. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Aaron cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. It was the question that undid her completely, the fact that he asked, that he waited for permission instead of just taking. Eleanor nodded, and Aaron lowered his head slowly, giving her plenty of time to change her mind. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it made her ache, and Eleanor felt the last of her walls crumble. This was trust, she realized. This was what it felt like to be with someone who held your heart carefully. That kiss changed everything. Aaron began staying in town more often, taking a room at Eleanor's boarding house so he could spend more time with her. They fell into an easy domesticity, working together during the day and sitting by the fire at night, talking about everything and nothing. Aaron taught Eleanor to shoot, insisting she should be able to defend herself if needed. Eleanor taught Aaron to read better, patiently working through books with him in the evenings. The physical intimacy between them grew slowly, at Eleanor's pace. Aaron never pushed, never demanded, just accepted whatever she was willing to give. A kiss goodnight, holding hands while they walked, eventually his arm around her shoulders as they sat together. Each small step forward felt like a victory, proof that she could do this, that she could let someone close without losing herself. Winter arrived, blanketing Marysvale in snow. Eleanor's boarding house was full of miners and trappers waiting out the weather, and she was constantly busy cooking and cleaning. Aaron helped whenever he could, chopping wood and shoveling snow, making sure Eleanor did not work herself into exhaustion. On Christmas Eve, Aaron gave Eleanor a gift that made her cry. It was a small wooden box he had carved himself, intricate and beautiful with her initials on the lid. Inside was a key. "What is this for?" Eleanor asked, turning the key over in her hand. "My cabin," Aaron said. "I want you to have it. That way, if you ever need to get away, if the town feels too crowded or you just need space, you have somewhere to go. It is yours as much as mine now." Eleanor threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the gesture. It was not about the cabin itself, but what it represented. Aaron was giving her freedom, giving her an escape route, trusting her with his most private space. It was the opposite of how Daniel had been, always demanding to know where she was, who she was with, never allowing her a moment of independence. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means everything." That night, after the guests had all gone to bed, Eleanor took Aaron's hand and led him upstairs to her private room. They had not been intimate yet beyond kissing, Eleanor's fears still too strong to allow more. But tonight, she was ready. She wanted this, wanted him, and she wanted to reclaim this part of herself that Daniel had tried to destroy. "Are you sure?" Aaron asked as she closed the door behind them. "Yes. But Aaron, I need you to be patient with me. If I ask you to stop, you have to stop immediately. Can you do that?" "Of course. Always. Just tell me what you need and I will do it." What followed was unlike anything Eleanor had experienced before. Aaron was patient and gentle, checking in with her constantly, letting her set the pace. He treated her body like something precious, and when she tensed up or started to panic, he stopped immediately and held her until she felt safe again. By the time they finally came together, Eleanor was crying, but they were good tears, healing tears. This was what intimacy was supposed to be like, she realized. Two people sharing pleasure and trust, not one person taking from another. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, and Eleanor felt something she had thought lost forever. She felt whole. "I love you," she said into the darkness. Aaron's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Have for months now. I want to marry you," Eleanor continued. "Not legally like you said, but I want to make promises to each other. I want to build a life together if you still want that." "More than anything," Aaron said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are everything to me, Eleanor. Everything." They were married in the spring, not in a church but in the meadow high in the Tushar Mountains where Aaron had first taken Eleanor to show her his world. The only witnesses were Mr. and Mrs. Peterson and the sheriff, who had become a good friend to both of them. They spoke their vows to each other, simple promises to love and respect and never let the other fall. Aaron slipped a ring onto Eleanor's finger, a simple band he had crafted himself from mountain gold, and Eleanor gave him one in return. "I take you as my husband," Eleanor said, her voice strong and sure. "Not because the law says so, but because my heart does. I promise to trust you with my fears and my hopes. I promise to build a life with you based on respect and partnership. And I promise to always tell you the truth, even when it is hard." "I take you as my wife," Aaron replied, his dark eyes shining. "I promise to protect you without controlling you. I promise to love you without demanding anything in return. And I promise to hold your heart carefully and never once let it fall." They sealed their vows with a kiss while the mountain wind sang around them, and Eleanor felt truly free for the first time in her life. Aaron moved into the boarding house permanently, and they settled into married life with surprising ease. He helped Eleanor run the business, and his presence made her feel safe in a way she never had before. The nightmares that had plagued her for years began to fade, replaced by dreams of a future she was building with her own hands. In the fall, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never thought she would have children, had never wanted to risk bringing a child into a world where she might not be able to protect them. But with Aaron by her side, the idea did not seem so frightening. "Are you happy?" she asked Aaron when she told him. "Happier than I have ever been," he said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "Scared out of my mind, but happy." "Me too," Eleanor admitted. "What if I am a terrible mother? What if I am too damaged to do this right?" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Aaron said firmly. "You are the strongest, bravest person I know. Our child is lucky to have you." Their son was born the following June, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Aaron's brother who had died in the war. Holding her son for the first time, Eleanor felt a love so fierce it nearly overwhelmed her. She would do anything to protect this child, she realized. She would move mountains and drain oceans if that was what it took to keep him safe. Aaron was a wonderful father, patient and gentle with the baby, constantly helping with the endless work that came with a newborn. He would walk Samuel around the boarding house at night when the baby fussed, singing old mountain songs in his deep voice. Eleanor would wake to find them like that, Aaron pacing the floor with Samuel cradled against his broad chest, and her heart would feel so full she thought it might burst. The years passed in a blur of happiness Eleanor had never expected to find. The boarding house continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected establishments in Marysvale. Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler into a bright, curious boy who loved following his father around. When Samuel was 3, Eleanor gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Michael and Rose. The boarding house was chaotic with 3 young children, but it was a good chaos, full of laughter and love. Aaron still went up to his cabin sometimes, needing the solitude of the mountains to quiet his mind, but he never stayed long. His family pulled him back, Eleanor and the children who needed him. The war nightmares that had plagued him for so long became less frequent, replaced by dreams of his wife and his children and the life they were building together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Aaron and Eleanor rode back up to the meadow where they had spoken their vows. It was spring again, and the meadow was full of wildflowers. They left the children with Mrs. Peterson for the day, wanting time alone together. "You ever regret it?" Eleanor asked as they sat together in the grass. "Giving up your solitary life in the mountains for the chaos of life with me?" "Not for a single second," Aaron said, pulling her close. "You gave me something I thought I had lost forever, Eleanor. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to believe I could be more than what the war made me." "You gave me that too," Eleanor said. "You taught me that it was possible to trust again, that not all men are cruel or selfish. You held my heart carefully and never once let it fall, just like you promised." They renewed their vows that day, the same words they had spoken a decade before, but now seasoned with the knowledge of what they had built together. They had survived so much, both separately and together. They had taken their broken pieces and forged something beautiful. Years continued to pass. Samuel grew into a strong young man who shared his father's love of the mountains and his mother's business sense. He talked about becoming a guide, taking people into the high country, showing them the beauty that his parents had fallen in love with. Michael was quieter, more studious, content to help his mother run the boarding house. And Rose was fierce and independent, already showing signs that she would be a force to be reckoned with. Eleanor and Aaron grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies showing the marks of hard work and full lives. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by years of partnership and trust. Aaron never stopped bringing Eleanor wildflowers from the mountains. Eleanor never stopped making Aaron's favorite coffee just the way he liked it. They never stopped checking in with each other, making sure the other was happy, that their needs were being met. The foundation of respect and trust they had built their marriage on never cracked, even when times were hard. When Eleanor was 45, she decided to write down her story. She wanted her children to know where she had come from, what she had survived, and how she had found happiness. But more than that, she wanted other women to know that it was possible to escape, to start over, to find love after trauma. She wrote about Daniel and the years of abuse, about the bullet that had shattered her life and her trust. She wrote about the stagecoach accident and the mountain man who had carried her to safety. And she wrote about learning to trust again, about building a life and a love that was based on respect instead of control. The book was published by a small press in Salt Lake City and became unexpectedly popular. Women from all over the territory wrote to Eleanor, thanking her for her honesty, for giving them hope. Some came to Marysvale to meet her, to see for themselves that it was possible to survive and thrive. Eleanor welcomed them all, offering advice and support, using her own story to help others find their way. Aaron was proud of her, though he found the attention uncomfortable. He had never wanted to be anyone's hero, just Eleanor's husband. But he supported her fully, understanding that this work was important to her, that helping other women gave her purpose beyond their family. On a warm summer evening when Eleanor was 52, she and Aaron sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were grown now, Samuel married with a child of his own, Michael running his own business in Salt Lake City, and Rose teaching school in town. The boarding house was quieter these days, Eleanor and Aaron taking fewer guests now that they were older. "You remember the day we met?" Eleanor asked, her hand in Aaron's. "Every detail," Aaron said. "You looked at me like I was a bear that might eat you," Eleanor laughed. "You looked like a bear, all wild hair and mountains. And now you still look like a bear, just a domesticated one." Aaron grinned and pulled her close. "I would not have it any other way. This life with you, Eleanor, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected gently. "That is how it works when two broken people find each other. We put each other back together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Eleanor thought about the woman she had been, scared and damaged, unable to trust. And she thought about the woman she had become, strong and whole and surrounded by love. The journey between those two versions of herself had been long and hard, but worth every step. Aaron had kept his promise. He had held her heart carefully and never once let it fall. And in doing so, he had taught her that love did not have to hurt, that it could be gentle and safe and true. That was his greatest gift to her, greater than the ring or the cabin or the life they had built together. He had given her back her ability to trust, to hope, to love without fear. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Eleanor leaned her head on Aaron's shoulder and felt complete peace. This was happiness, she realized. Not the absence of pain or fear, but the presence of love strong enough to face both. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them both in their children and grandchildren, in the stories they would tell and the lessons they had learned. Eleanor Fitzgerald had never trusted a man with her heart before Aaron Calloway. But he had held it carefully and never once let it fall, and in doing so had given her the greatest gift of all. He had given her a life worth living and a love worth fighting for. And that, Eleanor thought as she closed her eyes and let herself simply be held, was more than enough. It was everything, the end,